Hello everyone. How was everyone's week? Well, I have an interesting week for you. Okay, as I'm pinning these posts, make sure that if you're checking this out live that you like, share and subscribe, same as if you're watching it as a playback. Tonight's show is always pinned to the top of the group if you're watching this on a playback. Okay, tonight's show. Mark McGowan has resigned. Bill Shorten's tribute to Mark. PHILLIP LOWE, the RBA directors, bad take. Tony Burke on wages. The PWC scandal that keeps going on. The Senate estimate stunts. ALBO owns DUTTON. The PHAMACY scam. Bruce LEHMAN dropped. And the breakdown of a war crime. Okay, so that's what we have tonight. Enjoy the show. Okay, first up, we have Mark McGowan has decided that his political career is now at an end. It'll be what I can only describe as a wonderful and lustrous career. The past 6 years has been an incredible journey for people of WA. In the beginning, there was an exorbitant amount of debt from the previous Liberal government of Colin Barnett's. Now, if you know anything of the sweet journey of Mark McGowan, you would understand that this is used to be very much a big conservative belt. Now, only 2 Liberals hold seats in WA. But in relation to that, Mark McGowan has worked extremely hard for the people of WA, reduced their debt, and has made strides to make WA a better place to live. In conjunction with that, can I also point out that Mark has achieved some very great goals in a very short amount of time. For instance, he has a lot of green goals that are going through and a lot of other ones that are yet to come up. What I do want to say is whoever replaces Mark McGowan, may you enjoy some love and opportunities to make the job a little bit easier. This comes on the back of recent stresses allowed to being part of a leftist government. For instance, with the hate of right-wing populist groups, these governments have experienced a lot of stress. One of them was not even here. Jacinta Ardern, she in New Zealand recently resigned too because of this same sort of stressor. They become so exhausted with it that it becomes almost intolerable to keep doing the job. Understand, however, that the goals of a leftist government are always to serve the people. Now, which also brings to mind like this kinder, gentler personality, which I think creates this moment when the very vitriolic hate that comes to some of these leaders, I think that's why this happens. Of course, if you watched any part of the hateful 2GB, Neil Mitchell, he had the take of well, that must mean Dean Andrews is out the door. Because, of course, it always has to come back to, well, if Mark's going, Dean Andrews must. I mean, honestly, I've never seen anybody rally around so much, along with Rachel Baxdale, to attack Dean Andrews. But I digress. This is a tribute to Mark McGowan and his very wonderful 6 years in government. And on that note, Bill Shorten also did an amazing tribute to exactly that. When you hear this, it has at first that typical sparring moment on the morning network programs of pretending like they're presenting two sides. Like the right wing has a genuine point, which, let's face it, if they did, they wouldn't be in opposition this appallingly. Needless to say, I think overwhelmingly we're in a position of allowing too much to sort of go on with the right wing. They've sort of gone too far. But let's have a look at Bill Shorten giving tribute to that.
His supporters around him, and quite frankly, Bill, the Federal Labor Party, because he got a political outcome for his party and for himself, while people were just having incredible mental health issues as a result of his decisions around COVID. And I just don't understand how we can celebrate that.
Chris, listen, I really like your journalistic style, and one of the things I like about it is you love to be the contrarian. You're the guy at the pub or the wedding who takes the other point of view just to get a rise out of people. COVID is not Mark McGowan's fault. COVID was dreadful, not just in Western Australia. There are a lot of people who got inconvenienced, but I don't blame Mark McGowan for that.
Inconvenienced?
Oh,
what about when you see people bawling their eyes out because they can't introduce their first child to their grandparents or can't go on the highway?
Chris, filling the airspace with your words doesn't make your argument any better. You've gone the full Ron DeSantis, the American contender for Trump. You just want to say that we should have just lowered all the borders and let it all rip.
Did I say that?
You know, you are very lucky, mate, that you've got the 2020 hindsight of rear vision goggles. I'd have done this, I'd have done that. They did it wrong. I think McGowan has done a great job. He's going out on top. And ultimately, what you and I think doesn't really matter to Mark McGowan. It's what West Australians think. And, you know, if a politician actually does a good job, serves his people well, seems to be pretty consistent.
But what's a good job?
Oh, okay, here's a good job. Has the economy grown?
State of the States Combank says they've come number 5. Let's be serious here.
I didn't mean to interrupt your question. I didn't mean to interrupt your question with an answer, mate.
I'm not saying.
You said what's a good job, and I got one line into it, and you just, you know, go off like Toto the dog having a little bark at me.
You're calling me Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
You know?
Oh. Hi, guys. Hi.
Hey.
So you know I'm still here. I mean, realistically, though.
It's Chris DeSantis.
It has got a ring to it. You've got to admit it.
So while there is this populist view of being like Ron DeSantis, and that is how the right wing are behaving. They're not behaving, you know, like they could have done a nice tribute to Mark. They could have called him a decent leader. They could have been decent humans. But no. Let's stick with being the worst scumbag in the world. And here's the thing. He's not even supposed to be like this far right. He's supposed to be like this center of the ground, normal, reasonable human being. Like Bill pointed out, they're always on the side of just disagreeing with you for the fact of disagreeing with you. Unfortunately, I've met people like this who will argue with you just for the sake of taking an opposition to whatever argument you're going to make. Now, this is one of many clips that I could show you that does exactly that. And that is what right-wing populism is. It's not necessarily about what's good or bad. It's just simply opposing because you can. And it doesn't have a rhyme or reason behind it. It's just because you can. And this sort of personifies where the Dutton government is. The opposition of the Dutton government. the way that they've presented themselves as if just saying no automatically to no matter what seems to be their way of governing in opposition. Now, I can tell you this, it never ends well for those people. They always look like they just want the fight rather than actually governing a nation. Now, if you're ever dealing with someone like this at a pub, instantly just go, well, I could just shit on everything that you say, or I could just stick with facts. And that instantly puts them in their reality check. This isn't new to this. This is just, and a lot of people have taken this oppositional thing, like, I will just oppose everything that you do. It's a very strange position to take. No government should behave in a way that doesn't represent the people's majority. And the people's majority said yes to the voice and many other things like this housing, the housing bill that's being put forward and many others. But it doesn't matter what people are supporting. The opposition have just got it in their heads that they've got to just say no. Just say no. And Mark McGowan's point to COVID was on point. And he did the very best that he could for the people of Western Australia. So I think in tribute to that, we should point out that that's what governing is. After 6 years of seeing what could be achieved in WA, I wish Mark McGowan and his family a wonderful recuperating time while they are going to be discussing how to move forward. I think that they've done a wonderful job. Okay. So Philip Lowe works for the Reserve Bank of Australia. He has a take that is monumentally bad. And this isn't like just a one-off. I'm going to say something stupid. It's almost like he's part of the conservative think tank that almost has that same ideology. Remember, Philip Lowe does come from the conservative view because not only did they pick him, but he continues to have this very creepy kind of view that just kicking the poor is just better off in the end. And the reason I call it creepy is because there is a large majority that's like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Have a listen to some of his takes where he says things like, oh, well, you know, instead of having a fourth bedroom, you should just have a fourth bedroom that is a office like I do here. You should just move someone in. A complete stranger into your home, expose all that to your children because, you know, the economy. This is one of very, very bad takes Philip Lowe has. But I'm not shocked that they do it. I'm just shocked that we have to endure it still. When his contract comes up, one has to hope that he will not be part of the renewal process. So let's take a look at one gentleman's take on Philip Lowe. Okay.
The population's increasing by 2% this year. Are there 2% more houses? No.
The absolute gall of this guy. The unmitigated neoliberal bollocks from this fiduciary pinecone just cannot be believed. For those of you that don't know, that was the RBA Governor, Philip Lowe, giving evidence at the Senate estimates yesterday. His Senate estimate session was wide-ranging in its scope and the questions that he faced. But this section in particular spoke about the inflationary pressures, particularly on housing, on the Australian economy, and how the recent federal budget is affecting them. There's two things that really get my goat here. First of all, he correctly points out the fact that the main inflationary pressures being faced at the moment are the cost of housing and the cost of groceries. So he just straight up admits that the wage spiral that they always use to justify increasing interest rates is completely false, and that we know that corporate profits are what is driving inflation. And despite all but admitting that, says there is nothing that we can do about inflation at this time. The cost of housing is a major factor in inflation, but he doesn't advocate for any policies to bring the cost of housing down. The cost of groceries and household supplies is a major inflationary factor at the moment, but he does not advocate for anything to bring down the corporate profiteering that major multinational corporations like Coles and Woolworths engage in to bring down those profits and bring down inflation. Second to that, this absolute sponge cake says that even though he acknowledges people are going to face inflationary pressures and really serious cost of living pressures throughout the next year at minimum, the only thing they can do is either move in home or take in flatmates. Never mind the fact that that is not feasible for the vast majority of Australians. Never mind that that won't actually fix the issue for nearly everyone. Never mind that people already share house and they still can't afford anything. Never mind the fact that this man is on $1 million salary, living in a multi-million-dollar house, and I very much doubt.
So this points out a few very good takes. You can't just move someone in and then think, well, that's going to end well. There's a lot of factors to this. Not only is that not affordable for the person living in that share house, but they also can't afford to live either. There's too much to this. And this reason that they do this whole take on, wow, we just got to keep wages lower because inflation, and when the opposite has been proving to be true. True that if you don't increase wages, inflation is going to get worse. There's going to be more pressures and less money to circulate, which will create a recession. This isn't an by accident moment. Understand that the previous Liberal government deliberately kept wages low by design. Tony Burke has made a case on that. So take a listen to that, because he seemed less impressed with that sort of take too.
I find it dreadful with all the different inflationary pressures that are out there, some international, some caused by long-term neglect in our supply chains, that some people want to just argue somehow it's workers' fault.
Do you accept any of the arguments that some of the employer groups have made that this would make it a lot more challenging for small businesses in particular to come out of the other side of COVID and get ahead?
For all the different challenges on businesses, and I have a respectful relationship with all the business groups, so I'm not out here to have a go at them in any way. And you know, they are paid by their members to try to keep all sorts of bills down, including wages bills. But for all the different pressures that face business, I don't want us to get to a situation where we're blaming the most vulnerable workers. I really don't think that's the correct path. I find it.
I agree. I don't believe it is entirely appropriate to blame people that have no control over what is happening. That is greatly, greatly harmful to our current situation. The Conservatives knew what they were doing, and they dipped out just before it got really terrible. And they constantly promised that they would fix this, that, and the other, and they did none of it. But I think most appallingly is what we're left with as a result. We are left with some really dire consequences of some people, life and death decisions. Remember when robo-debt was at its height, and we were saying, no, this is going to cost lives. It costed over 2,000 lives. Imagine what this is doing on a bigger scale. That's what this is. This is bigger, badder. There can't be any room to negotiate with this kind of thing. We have to figure this out. And quite honestly, the fact that it's taking this long, it's doing harm. Each day the Greens block the housing bill. Each day those idiots decide that they want to push for more. That pressure gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The chasm gets wider. There isn't an overnight switch that can be made, but that housing bill can ease some of it. But here's the thing. Here's the absolute truth. I do not believe that even when this housing bill passes, that it'll be instant. I do not believe even some of the wage rises that ALP plans, I don't believe that'll be instant. I'm telling you, in all sincerity, this problem is too big to just flick a switch and change. It took them 9 years to do this damage. 9 years. Do you think that even when all these bills pass, with all of its approvals, that it'll instantly get better? This is a time issue. It helps to do this in a very quick manner, to get all of these bills passed on wages, on housing, on the whole lot, because as soon as you hit the ground running, it'll be good for the nation. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, but do not think that the moment that day that the housing bill is passed, that all of our problems are over, because that's not built in any kind of reality that I want to give you. I want to give you the fact that I know it doesn't happen like that. And right now we have a lot of landlords that are bouncing around on this, that are exploiting this very issue. And a lot of you are going to face a lot of housing issues. And they're going to ask for some ridiculous amounts of money that you don't have. I know that because I'm a renter. And I feel it. I feel it here. And I'm not going to lie to you, it hurts. So to tell you that all of this is just par for the course isn't right. They designed this. Conservative governments spent a long time by design carving this path out. There were warnings given by people like me. We openly said, no, you keep them for long enough, the damage is going to be ginormous. Now the nation is going to be bucking at the teeth to go, why isn't Labor doing this? Why isn't Labor doing that? Because it's going to take time. This isn't like it. They're going to pull every lever that they got in their disposal. They're not going to fix all of this overnight, because 9 years worth of damage cannot be fixed overnight. Do not get disheartened as we're watching the housing debate, because I know that once it passes and that time that it all comes into play, we're going to get better. We just need to be a little bit understanding that they spent 9 years by design making it like that. And I have dealt with people that are having genuine grief, facing genuine homelessness. I know one woman that has her children visiting food banks, lost her home, her job, because she's living in a tent. She can't shower every day. Her children had to be pulled from school because she couldn't bathe them every day. It had so many runoff effects. Understand that this is what happened by design. They meant to do this. And you know, the saddest part is that's an Aboriginal woman too. The most vulnerable position that we put her in was that. And even when I called shelters and many other things that were supposed to be helping these communities, they all said that the waiting list was too long to help her. So they told her to sleep in the car with her children. So I took her to Big W and on Afterpay, we put a tent on for her children to sleep in. Then we mapped out how she was going to do it. And then from there, I took her to food banks that I knew of and a whole bunch of other things. So don't think that I don't understand. And I didn't do anything that anyone wouldn't do. I did something that everyone would do. When you have a friend that's like, no, I'm really stuck. I let her crash here for a few nights, but her pride was so riddled at this point. Her 4 children, along with my 2 and me and my husband, it was too much. And as you can see, I don't have a bed in here, so we were like cramming all these people in, and it wasn't working for her. I haven't heard from her in a few weeks since she got into some sort of restart program. Each time I've contacted her, she's gone to one meeting or another meeting. I think that this has beaten her pride up, and she's struggling to answer my calls. And that's sad. But no, I've seen the front line of this, and it feels desperate because it is. Okay, next we're going to talk about the PWC scheme. Now, this particular company has had several governmental contracts, and in those contracts, turns out that they were tax avoiding, and they were doing a whole bunch of things. They had immigration contracts and national security contracts, like a whole bunch of things that I don't really think that they were qualified for either. Okay. Oh, I didn't know I had that one. Okay. So let's start here.
Starting at the more recent time, if you want to start there as to when we...
Of course, it needs to buffer, because being reasonable with internet is a normal thing.
Aware of decisions, or are you looking for information?
Can we just get it on the record, the response? When did you first become aware?
I'm just hesitating because the word aware suggests a level of knowledge. And so when did we become aware that there had been a finding?
The word aware means a level of knowledge. Absorb that comment for a moment. This is a corporation designed with national security intent. They have the utmost details keeping us safe. And they're like, that says that we're aware. Now, why wouldn't you be aware? We would think that you're onto this, right? Nah, it's dodgy from the first.
By the TPB of a breach of
No, my
confidentiality.
question is, when did you become aware of the issue?
So in 2018, we were requested information from the ATO about a possible breach of confidentiality.
Okay. So that is when you first became aware of the issue?
Became aware there was an investigation around this issue, yes.
Okay. Why wasn't the matter immediately referred to the TPB by...
Now, watch this. It becomes more about how it looks. Like the prima facie case for this is incredible to listen to. What I'm setting you up to understand that these answers are... so a lot of the questions are fed to them beforehand, so they know what's going to be asked. So all of this, I'll take that question on notice, shouldn't exist, because they know what they're going to be asked, and they know everything that's going to come over this thing. That's one thing I want to inform you of. The second thing I want to point out here is watch how she answers this next part. It's going to be interesting about how they do this layering of protection around the reality of what happened here. Listen to this.
Treasury then.
So in 2018, as I said, we requested information from the ATO. We could not get further details of their concerns because the ATO is subject to strict secrecy provisions. Yes.
And do you have documentation that you can table?
I don't have information with me at the moment, Senator, and I'd be a little bit hesitant because of the AFP investigation to table that information. I imagine it's something that they would be wanting to look at.
Okay. So perhaps you can take that on notice, because we do want to step very carefully around the AFP inquiry, yet get as much as we can on the public record.
I want to cut in again. Understand that I don't have much faith in the AFP after what happened with Bruce Lehman and a few other cases, the fixated persons unit and a whole bunch of other things. So don't play with me when they're saying, oh, no, the AFP is investigating. There needs to be a lot of integrity restored to the AFP before I'll take any investigation that they take seriously.
Responsible way. And Treasury had this information and you served the Treasurer. Did you advise the Treasurer as the Minister responsible at the time?
I would have to take it on notice.
How serious does it have to be before you draw it to the attention of the Minister?
I think I'd be cautious in the way in which you characterised those events.
Can you help me understand exactly the steps?
We were asked for copies of confidentiality agreements.
Copies of confidentiality agreements, okay.
But we weren't told a wider context.
Now that seems to be the issue, that they're more intent on how they need to do things on the confidentiality rather than expose corruption. It doesn't end there. I really, really wish it did, but it gets worse, right? And as the questioning goes on, you get a little bit like, oh, really? Like it's this bad? And then you start sort of going, oh, hell no. They are trying to do a protection racket right before our eyes. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so listen to how this all came out as she keeps going.
Were you at that point aware, in the way that the ATO was clearly, that a scheme had been constructed to rob Australians of the taxation that multinational companies should pay?
So we are a policy-making agency. So it is the ATO's role to administer those laws. So it was appropriate that the ATO was aware. But as a policy-making agency, I don't think I could say we were aware.
They didn't tell you. Is that what that means? They did not tell you about what had happened and what they were doing.
So they have secrecy laws, and so the operation of those meant that they could not tell us.
So this was, it's interesting, confidentiality, secrecy. Mr. Peter John Collins felt happy to breach confidentiality, but the secrecy protections, which is important to protect the identity of people and their interactions with the taxation, became an impediment for them advising Treasury that PwC, Australia and Global were trying to rip off the Australian public. They didn't tell you that.
As I said, they couldn't, and you're right. There's a balance in all legislation, and those secrecy provisions are there to protect the confidentiality of all taxpayers, so that all taxpayers can understand.
Show me how this looks good. Show me how in one line any of this looks good. It doesn't. It looks appalling because it simply is. There's no way around saying it any nicer. There is no having this look better. Her answers are appalling.
When they engage with the ATO, it's kept confidential. But it does mean that it sometimes could act as a barrier for what they could tell other people, including bodies like Treasury.
Okay, but at 2018, a balloon's gone up and you can see that there's something going on. Is that correct? You've been asked for a copy of the confidentiality document, presumably the one that Mr. Peter John Collins signed on 3 occasions when he was invited, not as a consultant, when he was invited as a knowledgeable Australian citizen to serve the nation by bringing his knowledge to the table in order that the Parliament might make good laws for the country. Is that a correct description of the confidentiality agreement that you referred to, Ms. Brown?
So the confidential agreement, yes.
Were you aware?
Now, understand what we're looking at. Remember when I talked about the 9 years of incompetence and craziness that we experienced? This is a runoff of that. And we're going to experience this for a long time yet. You can't just unring the bell of their level of corruption. Someone needs to go to jail for this stuff. This stuff's really bloody serious. We have 22 billion wrapped up into this company. And they're like, you know, whatever. I'll take that question on notice. You know, we've got it. This isn't accountability. If you're writing something like this, we'd be in big trouble. And he went there as a person, an entity, like a human living flesh person, not even representing PwC at that time. He could have shared that detail, but didn't. Chooses not to. You know, and I don't think the AFP is going to come out, you know, and say that this or that needs to be done because they're useless. Okay. So let's have a look at, we heard Defence has a whopping 54 contracts with PwC for a value of $223 million. This isn't like an accident that they had this. And do not think that this isn't like, this is bad. Given the sensitive nature of the information inside the defence and known issues with the PwC, this is deeply concerning. I have to agree.
Secretary, how many current contracts does Defence have with PwC?
Thanks, Senator. I'll get the Associate Secretary who's been following this issue closely to give you a precise answer.
Good morning, Senator. Matt Giannopoulos, Associate Secretary. 54 current contracts.
A list provided to me by the incredibly competent Parliamentary Library Research had 51 contracts as at the 17th of May. Have there been any entered into in the last bit?
Just let me get my paperwork open. I'm not aware of any that have been entered into since the 17th of May.
All right, but how many did you say there are?
54.
And what's the current contract value of the 54?
Current contract value is $223,299,943.56.
More than 220.
No, you think that that's as bad as it gets, right? No, there were more. There was more into this. Do not think that it just ended there. No. It gets worse. This situation is bad. I'm going to show you more parts of this scandal because I believe we're missing a lot of stuff in this. Like I said, if you are a first-time listener, a viewer, or long-term viewer, please like, share, and subscribe. This stuff matters. And I need you to see this stuff.
Yes, I can do that.
And did PwC provide you with the list of 54 names?
No, they did not.
So you're taking them at their word.
Yeah.
Well, I have letters from the current CEO and our lead defence partner assuring us that they have done that work.
You're taking them at their word with no separate verification. You're just trusting what PwC tell you. Is that right?
It doesn't
I'm
look good.
accepting their assurance at this stage.
Sorry, Secretary, how could you possibly accept the word of PwC and their blanket assurance when we know that they have repeatedly breached confidentiality obligations with the Commonwealth and repeatedly acted in a grossly unethical fashion? Did you know that Defence had just accepted PwC's word?
Senator, I was aware that PwC.
And then it gets a little bit more disgraceful. Senator Nick McKim explodes at Treasury after asking who their internal auditors are. Nick McKim, how can you possibly have confidence in the advice? That's absurd. Now watch this, because this is where it gets a little bit more saucy. And I'm showing you this because this isn't like, whoopsie, we got something wrong. This is like, oh my God, why would you, like, how could you just take them at their word? What is wrong with you? These are government contracts. Like, think smart. Get better answers. Then, you know, you're the government agency in control of this, of all of this. They have to inform you at minimum.
So your internal auditor would provide advice and assurance on the effectiveness of Treasury's governance arrangements. That's directly reading from your financial report, and they may, depending on circumstance, provide advice on conflicts of interest. Is that a reasonable categorisation of what they would do for you?
They may.
They could be asked through an internal audit process to review any matter.
Yeah. And who's contracted to undertake Treasury's internal audit?
Our current internal audit function is provided by PricewaterhouseCoopers.
PricewaterhouseCoopers. So a company embroiled in a governance scandal is providing advice to Treasury on governance. I mean, we're through the looking glass here, aren't we, Dr. Kennedy?
They're our internal auditors.
I know.
They have been for some time.
That's right. So $985,000 contract.
They have a contract with us till the end of this year.
It's a $985,000 contract, isn't it?
And in the delivery of those services.
So, Dr. Kennedy, I mean, they're providing advice to you as Secretary, as your annual report says. How can you have confidence in advice from PricewaterhouseCoopers on Treasury's governance arrangements, given what we now know about PricewaterhouseCoopers' attitude towards governance? How can you possibly have confidence in their advice? So it fails the pub test, though, doesn't it, really, that a company that's, let's be clear, stolen confidential Treasury information and monetised it to help their clients actually avoid paying tax in Australia, that's been exposed as having somewhere between a shambolic governance arrangement to absolute corruption of the highest order, and they're providing Treasury and you, Dr. Kennedy, personally as Secretary, with advice on governance. I mean, it's absurd. It's an absurd situation, isn't it?
And it is. It's precisely what's wrong with it. This isn't an accident that this is happening. The LNP knew what they were doing. They just found anyone shady that they could, you know, buddies. The name Waterhouse, though, has me interested because I know that, I wonder if that's to the Gale Waterhouse kind of thing. I don't know. It mightn't be the same people. When I heard Waterhouse, kind of made me think, because they are friends with the Liberal government, which it wouldn't surprise me if they're all buddy kind of people, because they've done that a lot. So this week came with some incredible stunts. And what I mean by stunts, I mean, this isn't It's like a conservative wet dream. They seem to be just acting up because they can. Take a look at the stupid stunts that they've pulled. Just this week in Senate estimates, while we're talking about real serious things, with corruption, this is what they chose to do.
Why don't we try and ask questions around the budget? Let's have another crack.
This year, we did celebrate the 35th anniversary of the opening of Parliament House. Is there a reason why we didn't play the national anthem?
I notice you don't wear a tie to estimates. Is there any particular dress code that applies to the department?
I ask people to use their skill and judgment.
I find it very strange that there are still people that clean the trays when you walk through security, if that's the case.
Yes, we've now stopped that. So
that's gone?
No, I'm just interested. Maybe the sleeves rolled up because you're doing lots of hard work.
Is ASIO monitoring violent trans activism in this country?
And does the Albanese government view the view that women should play women on the sporting field? Is that considered by the Albanese government a hard right extremist view or an acceptable middle of the road view?
Unless you have a question that is relevant, I do need to hand over the
it's
call.
relevant. And it was my last.
Well, you've got your last question. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm sure we'll find out.
Does ASIO have any agents presently employed or seconded as journalists in this country?
I don't talk about how we do our work and the capability we would use to do that.
So that's a yes?
No, it's not. It's a no comment.
Is it correct that you wore a Black Power T-shirt whilst making a formal address to department staff recently?
I don't even know what a Black Power T-shirt is, no. I wore a T-shirt which had an Aboriginal emblem on it, but it made no reference to the referendum or voice.
So the emblem, would that be the Aboriginal flag?
Yes, the Aboriginal flag was depicted on that.
And
yes.
there was no words around that?
Correct.
Not on the front or the back? Okay.
Happy to take any other questions about T-shirts you might have.
This is a budget hearing. These are budget hearings. This is the shit they want to pull. Like, they're having good God's green earth where they have a handy government levers. But then it gets even more ridiculous because as the week goes on, you're kind of like, oh, can't get stupider than that, can it? But then we have this. Dutton tries to do the whole, I can own Labor, and I'm like, really? You can, looking at the way ALBO owns things right now? Sure, we'll give it a go. But again, I wasn't surprised to see ALBO just obliterate them. My neighbours are a little bit raucous today. I don't know what is going on in their world, but they seem to be partying hard.
3 weeks ago, the opposition leader gave his budget reply. And at that, he had a centrepiece of his budget reply was a policy about JobSeeker. But he failed to release any costings on the night. On the 11th of May. On the 15th of May, he said this, probably about half of what Labor's proposing to their own measure was his costing. Probably about half. Then on the 16th of May, the Australian reported, in recent days, the coalition has briefed out 2 competing costings for its policy, $700 million and in the order of $2.3 billion.
700 to 2.3.
Close. The next day, the Australian reported, opposition leader Peter Dutton has conceded he doesn't know the cost of his marquee budget reply proposal. And then earlier that day, he went on Sky to clean it up and he said this, the difference in the costings is around the parameters and the assumptions, and the Parliamentary Budget Office will finalise that work and that'll be released in due course.
So they don't even have a date for when they're going to do their proper costings. They're not taking anything seriously at all. But they're not done there because, of course, they're not. Here's more of Dutton getting owned by ALBO. And I show you guys this because this is how utterly ridiculous they are. Okay.
In spite of the fact the leader of the opposition doesn't believe in costing policies, here's one. Do I think there are communities out there that want a $10 billion facility? There's a costing for you. $10 billion for a small nuke plant. and potentially want to get free electricity for everyone who lives inside of that nuclear reactor. So there you go. It's going to cost $10 billion, but the energy's free. Why didn't we think of that? In spite of the fact the leader of the opposition doesn't believe in costing policy.
That's another joke. I mean, how can we take them seriously on anything? There's no reason to have this government be taken seriously at any time. They're not taking even the most simple measures to be taken seriously. But here's another stunt that the LNP is helping push. There is a pharmacy, Labor's pharmacy bill, which would allow you to get, if you're a chronic illness person, to get 2 months of medication at one time. This won't prevent any shortages or anything. You're just grabbing your scripts and going. But that doesn't matter. Check out the Pharmacies Guild's response to that. They're sitting up there in that top row to pretend like they're hard done by. Pharmacy Guild members are sitting here jeering in the gallery in their white coats while David Littleproud claims in question time the 60-day scripts are potentially bankrupted. So they're getting spurred on to be incredibly greedy. So each time you see one of these, know the scam for what it is, a scam. There can be no rewording around it. This is a scam, and to call it anything less, it just taints their water. Okay, next we're going to talk about Bruce LEHMAN. Turns out that he got his court hearing dropped. He had one with the Daily Telegraph. Not only did the Daily Telegraph have their case dropped with them, he dropped it. They paid some of his legal bills, some, not all, and they didn't pay for any of his filing costs. And they have said that they're going to keep all articles in relation to this up. He's still in the process of suing the ABC and others. So we'll see how that one, and I think it's Channel 10, we'll see how that one pans out. But it's not going to look good. Bruce LEHMAN is literally at the end of all of this. He cannot be held up as some sort of victim when there is an actual victim to what he did. There's just no working around that. Okay. So, next one. We're going to talk about Ben Roberts-Smith. I feature these topics because these are the things that are front and center, playing out for everyone to see. And I think it's important that we discuss them. So, Ben Roberts-Smith resigned from Seven as war crimes judgment reverberates around the globe. Ben Roberts-Smith, billionaire backer Kerry Stokes, said that the imputations found to be true in the crushing court judgment. I've got to show you the article that I'm reading from. Opposition leader Peter Dutton appeared on TV to say that Australia's elite special air services has seen significant culture change. But as some of the country's most high-profile figures react to Thursday's defamation ruling in the federal court, that Mr. Roberts-Smith, the man at the centre of the allegations, hasn't been heard from. There are 110 days of evidence, and the most expensive trials in Australian history of the war veteran didn't turn up to hear Justice Anthony, finding which reverberated much further than the courtroom. On Friday, it was announced that Roberts-Smith had resigned from his role at the general manager at Seven West Media Queensland operations. In an email to staff, the Seven chief executive, James Warburton, said that the high-profile employer has been on leave during the defamation case and that his offer to resign was accepted. Now, this relates to him killing civilians. Yeah, this man decides to go to war and kill civilians. The very thing that we would, I don't like war at all, but if you're going to go, don't kill innocent people. It's just a basic principle. But watch the meltdown of this as I discuss it on 7:30. It was a catastrophe of miscalculation as they discussed the case.
Now, Nick Mackenzie just said that the law is not a friendly place for journalists. Why is that?
He's right about that. So at core, our defamation laws date back to the English common law, sort of 19th century and even before, and they haven't evolved in the same way that they have in the countries that we most like to compare ourselves to, like the United States with its First Amendment tradition, even the United Kingdom when it was part of the...
You don't want anything like the First Amendment, because that absolute right means hate speech is not included. They don't have anything that reverberates that well. But the media laws do need to be cleaned up, and that's just that. I don't think giving carte blanche to free speech is the answer. And the reason for that is because there are things that just shouldn't be said, like if you're racist, homophobic, all that kind of stuff.
The European Union and became party to the European Convention on Human Rights. You know, Australia doesn't have any broad-based protection for freedom of speech or freedom of the press of the kind that those other countries have.
So, and we're talking about extremely brave reporting of the highest caliber. But let me ask you this first of all, which I've been thinking about since the decision came down. Why would Ben Roberts-Smith bring a case like this when he had so much to lose?
It's a catastrophic miscalculation, isn't it? And what the judge has found, I mean, these were irreconcilable versions of events. Ben Roberts-Smith vigorously denied the allegations that Nick and the others had reported. Someone had to be lying, and the judge has found in substance that Ben Roberts-Smith was lying about the central claims made in the 9 stories. Now, the implications are obviously far-reaching. He's lost the case, and that will have a financial consequence, but much more seriously than that, he's now been found to the civil standard by a judge of the Federal Court of Australia after a very hard-fought case to have committed murder, to have committed war crimes, to have shamed his nation. Those are findings that will dog him forever.
So that's one law. So there's more in this. So don't think that it just ends there. Kerry Stokes financed Ben Roberts-Smith in the defamation fight. This is a media proprietor who should believe in journalism, yet he was waging a huge war against the investigative journalism that we should have seen. That's going to be a problem. So let's have a look at what that looks like.
Were you ever shocked by the way the array of powerful figures against you behaved?
I remain shocked to this day. Kerry Stokes financed Ben Roberts-Smith, this defamation fight. This is a media proprietor who should believe in journalism, yet he was waging a huge war against investigative journalism. What does that say? That there are questions that only Kerry Stokes can answer, but what does that say about his support of the media? Brendan Nelson, the former Defence Minister, was a character witness for Ben Roberts-Smith, got up repeatedly in public and stood by him. Okay, so that tells you where it sits, that Ben Roberts-Smith, that tells you where it sits, is that it's not going well, and Ben Roberts-Smith did lose his defamation case. That had 110 days of hearings. Oh, my keyboard just sort of blinked out. That's what I was looking down at. So the amount of times people have said to me, well, you don't go to war, so how can you judge it? It was these men who did deploy, saw the things that were morally not right, that led them to speak up. So understand that there was a moral compass to this. The very people that exposed what Ben Roberts-Smith did were fellow military people.
So this excuse that keeps getting trotted out, that people like me haven't been to war, therefore we cannot judge it. That's a weird position to take. Murder is murder, regardless of what the reasons and the pressures around doing so. You cannot justify this kind of action. And if you want to serve this country in any way, I salute you. And the reason I do that is because you do need a good defence service. But this idea that you are beyond reproach because I haven't physically been there is an utterly repugnant stance to take. Because you're representing me when you do that. You're representing the whole of this nation as you do it. So this idea that you are beyond reproach when you do something wrong is just not there. So listen to this take that gets brought up on 7:30, which I think is ABC has taken a battering, but this is one thing that I think was done really, really well. Okay.
You just talked about this a bit. You're talking about an investigation of a war hero, and this is in a nation that venerates heroism in war. How much more complicated did that make?
And it should. And it should always give credit to its war heroes. I'm 100% for that. Anything less is wrong. But we're not talking about a war hero here. We're talking about a person who committed crimes. Crimes. So to pretend like they've got the moral high ground here is beyond repugnant. His own fellow military was like, hey, let's deal with this issue. And that those men and women that served with him are feeling just as equally bad about this. Enough to dob him in. That's what this comes down to.
The job that you had to do.
Endlessly more complicated. The amount of times people have said to me, well, you didn't go to war, so how can you judge? Or have said, well, how can it be murder in the field of war? And the answer to both those questions is this. It was Robert Smith's own colleagues who did go to war, who fought alongside him, who served with absolute distinction, who put their lives on the line. It was they who were horrified about what they saw. It was their truth. There are rules and laws in war. It is unlawful to murder a civilian. It is unlawful to murder a prisoner with his hands bound, which was one of the allegations that's been upheld by the court. It was these men who did deploy and saw things that morally were not right to them, that led to them to speak up and put us on our path. And ultimately, we were guided by their moral revulsion, and we reported their truth. And that's been upheld today.
Okay. So by a judge, it was found overwhelmingly that Kerry Stokes had helped this deception. Now, this isn't like by accident. This was by design. They knew exactly what they were getting. Understand that there are people, real whistleblowers, that have been taken over the real courts, like David McBride, that exposed real corruption. And then you have Richard Boyle. People like this that have experience exposing real problems. And they're not treated like heroes for doing it. No. The government treats them like they're scumbags because they've exposed on their part some really awful things that have been done here. And I think that's going to come up at some point. We have reached a point where we're going to have to discuss what we consider heroic. I think it's heroic what Ben Robert Smith, fellow military men and women, did and expose that. And I think it's heroic what David McBride did and Richard Boyle. They're heroes. On different levels, they're heroes. But all the same to me, they are heroes in my eyes. They've done something that I can't thank enough for. So with that, I want to say thank you. I hope you guys had a wonderful evening. And good night. Thank you. See you same time, same place next week. Bye.